I'm Danny, that witch next door, and you're listening to That Witch Podcast. Hello, neighbor, and welcome to another very special episode of That Witch Podcast. As always, I'm Danny. I'm that witch next door. I'm your host, your guide, your mentor, and instructor in all things magic, witchcraft, astrology, and witchy business. And today is officially That Witch Podcast 1-year birthday. Our first solar return, our first full revolution around the sun, ladies and gents, and folks of all kinds. This has been one of the coolest years in my life. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating at all. This has been one of the coolest journeys I've ever been on. I wanted today, honestly, to be a quick little personal episode, just about me, a little bit of my journey and the journey of That Witch Podcast, and really how far I've come and we've come because of all of you and your amazing, amazing support. So, this, full disclosure, was not my first podcast, actually. This has been my third podcast that I've hosted, but the only podcast that I've ever hosted 100% on my own 2 feet. And I remember writing down the idea to do my own podcast years ago when I very, very first started cooking up the idea for That Witch Next Door in general, which for those of you that don't know, actually started out as a blog. That Witch Next Door, that was my brainchild, was that this was going to be my witchy blog. And it has turned into so much more than that. And now I love to think of That Witch Next Door really as a huge, huge collection of resources of all kinds. But when I very first was brainstorming and writing down my business plan and my mission and everything for That Witch years ago, which was in late 2018 and early 2019. I remember on that first brainstorm page, which I still have in one of my notebooks that I saved, to eventually do my own podcast. And obviously from 2019 to 2021, it took a couple of years, but this has been so much more than I ever could have possibly dreamed than those first early days of some of the episode concepts that I wrote down. In fact, because of the 1-year anniversary episode, it totally inspired me to dig out that old brainstorm notebook that I had from the earliest days of That Witch. And I'm actually going to be doing a lot of creating and repurposing of some of my old early content because my following was really small, so hardly anybody saw things. I would archive and delete posts all the time because of my hyper perfectionism and my imposter syndrome. So my journey, since launching That Witch Next Door in 2019, which was officially in March of 2019, and I was still co-running Arcana Herbal with my 2 business partners and friends. And we were also thinking about and starting to do our own individual side projects around that time. And that was when I officially launched That Witch Next Door, was in March of 2019. And honestly, that journey since then is so much more than just business and professional themed and related events. It has been like the most radical healing journey I ever could have possibly imagined. When I look back at even just pictures of myself from 2019 to now, it's wild to me. It's really, really wild to me when you can look back at yourself and you've gotten to the healing point where you can look back and go, yeah, that was an identity crisis that lasted a really, 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 really long time. And then you can see the pictures and this shift and this transformation, especially in like videos and seeing how I carry myself and how I talk and things like that. Um, you can really see somebody stepping more and more into themselves. And that sounds like beautiful, shiny sunshine and rainbows, but it's been a lot of murky, icky, gritty shadow work, you know? And there's been a lot of loss along the way and a lot of letting things go and leaving things behind. And, um, you know, there was a time in my life where I dreamed about this. I dreamed about everything that I have right now. My own podcast, my own business that's paying my bills. Like I make a normal ass income. Like I'm by no means am I rolling in the dough, everyone. I think so many people just automatically assume if you have a good following on a podcast or a good following on a social media page that you must be rolling in it. And it's like, no, we're usually pretty lucky as creators, as content creators. We're really blessed to be making just kind of a normal average livable wage from your business and your content creation. So I remember dreaming about that, being able to pay for things for my family and contribute to my household and treat myself and my daughter and my friends and my family with my own from scratch earnings. I have my house that my partner and I really teamed up and worked our fucking asses off for, but y'all heard that huge amazing journey with my husband and I on our 2-part episode not that long ago. But I mean, I just want this to be a message of gratitude to all of you, but I also want it to be a message of inspiration and hope for anyone that needs to hear this, because it took so long to get here. And it took so much patience on my part, and it took so much work on my part. And a lot of that work was radical self acceptance and therefore radical self compassion. And that is so fucking hard. I was a college dropout. Like, if you ever hear me talk about college on the show, like, I reference that as a time in my life because I was there technically for 3.5 years. And I didn't technically flunk out to the point where they kicked me out, you know, or told me I couldn't go to school anymore, but that was coming the next semester. I've always been that way. I'll like cut and run right before someone dumps me, right before I've always been that person. I'll quit the job right before, you know what I mean? Back in my dark rock bottom days when I wasn't my high work ethic self that I am today, I'd cut and run right before they were going to cut me or reprimand me. And the same totally went for college. And I'm part of a generation that, and I think that this trickles into Gen X and also into Gen Z, that we have been told a lie for so long that you have to go to school or your life's going to be shitty and meaningless and nothing, and you won't ever amount to anything. And like the truth is that university or college, number one, not to digress too much, needs crazy reform in our society anyways to actually be effective and accessible, but I digress. But college or university or any kind of higher level education should be based person to person, experience to experience. And we need to start teaching people that there are so many avenues that we can take. We are such incredibly resourceful and adaptive creatures. We learn like exceptionally well. We really do. All of us. We might learn in very fucking different ways from one another. We might operate in very different ways for very different reasons. But one thing I can tell you is that we are a resourceful bunch. Really, we are. And I am so grateful and so proud of myself that younger and yes, more unevolved versions of me didn't give up and didn't quit. And even in my darkest of times, kept choosing little tiny choices for me, whether it was saying no to those jobs or saying yes to certain friends and no to others, and really so many things in my environment and lifestyle. And in this past year in particular, I owe so much of my growth and my healing to all of you. I really can honestly say in so many ways I got myself here, like to the show, like to the mic. Still with the help of lots of other people in my experience, of course. But once I got here and got to the mic, so much of it was all you. And I can honestly tell you, let's see, by the time you are all hearing this on July 22nd, tomorrow, July 23rd, I will officially hit 6 months alcohol free, which is fucking huge accomplishment. I never could have imagined going 6 months without alcohol before in my life. This is like huge. And I can honestly attribute so much of that part of my healing journey to this show and all of you. Ever since I very, very first felt called to showing up on one of the first episodes, very similar to this one, where I just talked about me and opened my heart and talk about my story and the struggles that I've been through. And I just was honest about my addiction and my shadow work and how I became a death witch and how so much of my death work and work with underworld deities really ended up being this self-healing journey, particularly around my struggles with addiction that I had struggled with for so long. And it just rippled out into so much more abundant healing than I ever could have imagined. Not long after that episode, I really took my mental health into my own hands, and I got a diagnosis for ADHD, and I really took my treatment into my own hands. Well, with the hands of my amazing therapist as well, of course. But I made those appointments. I showed up, and I still show up every single week. And I can honestly say that I show up wholeheartedly to my growth journey. And so much of that is because I show up for all of you. And because it means something to me to show up with that real magic for real life, for being just a real fucking person to all of you. Every single one of you that reaches out and tells me that when you listen to this show, it just sounds like you're hanging out with one of your friends. Like, you have no idea. You have no idea what that means to me, because that's exactly what I want. I just want to feel like a real ass person that you'd want to hang out with, that hopefully teaches you some cool shit from time to time, honestly, that you get to share some laughs with. You feel comfortable and safe crying around and being your whole self too. And the only reason I can do that is because so many of you reflect that back at me. So thank you for everything this last year. You really do mean the world to me. I mean it so much every time I share my gratitude with each and every single one of my neighbors in this incredibly magical neighborhood. So thank you again for supporting this show. To continue supporting, don't forget, to share the show with a friend. You can see all of my affiliate links in the show notes below. Those are other ways. But really just talking about and sharing the show with people has been the best form of support. So thank you. I hope that you have an absolutely amazing weekend. Happy fucking Leo season. The sun is shining, right? That solar energy. Stay safe, have fun, and stay magical out there. See you next week, everyone. Hey, you magical human. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of That Witch podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is to share with a friend or give a shout out on your social media. You can also leave a 5-star rating and review on both Apple and Spotify. And if you can't get enough of all of our witchy magical content here in the neighborhood, you definitely want to make sure you're subscribed to my email newsletter, That Witch Gazette. It's a really fun, really convenient one-stop shop to stay up to date on all of the news and happenings here in our neighborhood. If you have any questions, suggestions, ideas for the show, or if you'd like to sponsor an episode, you can send me a message at thatwitchnextdoor.com/conjurethatwitch. Thank you so much. I'll see y'all next time.